are there good and bad emotions? So some people that you talk to will say anger is a bad emotion, or anxiety is a bad emotion. Is that true? Are there bad emotions and are there good emotions? Some people think joy and happiness is the only real good emotion. Some people think grief or sadness is a bad emotion. And maybe you're here and you would say, I wouldn't qualify any of those as good and bad. I would just say, when someone's sad, I get worried about that emotion. All right? For many of us, we've kind of labeled or categorized all these different emotions that we feel, and we've placed some other over others, like maybe this is a better emotion. Yeah, where did we get that idea from? So I want to talk about that, okay? And then we need to ask this question: can emotions be trusted? Can they be trusted? If you feel sad, can you trust that sadness? If you feel happy, can you trust that happiness? Whatever mood you're in, can it be trusted? And here's my hope. I want to say this straight from the beginning of the teaching. What I want from Vinings Lake, what I want from this spiritual collective, is that when people think about Mableton, they're like, oh, there's this group of people that gather, and God, I don't know anything about them. They're very strange, okay? I don't know if they're Christians. I don't know if they're post-Christians. I don't know if they're post-evangelical. I don't know what label they carry, but they gather and they call themselves a spiritual collective. But one thing I can say about them, and hopefully people can say more than one thing, but one thing I can say about them is this: they know something about emotional maturity. That's my hope. That's my hope. May it never be said about Vinings Lake, that is the most immature people I've ever encountered in my entire life. May it be said about you that you are the most emotional, mature person in your family. Now, I know I say that right now, some of you are like, yeah, duh, all right? Yeah, all right? As Thanksgiving approaches, as an election approaches, it's more important than ever, and I don't use that phrase a lot. It's more important than ever for you and I to understand, become, and demonstrate emotional maturity. Now, to get at all this, of course, you know where I'm going. I need to read a story in the text. I want to read a story, and then I'm going to make a very simple, basic point, and then I need to show you a video, okay? And then when you see this video, you're going to see how this basic point that I'm going to give you, it may sound so simple, but you're going to realize, oh, interesting. We do live in a culture where now this basic idea is actually very subversive. All right? So that's where we're going today. Now, let me read this. This is, I want to read a text. It's in Mark chapter 3. And let me give you a little context of kind of what's happening here. Mark, first gospel written in the New Testament. Everyone follows Mark. But Mark in chapter 3, this is what is called kind of a series of conflict stories between Jesus and, I would use the phrase, religious gatekeepers. And there were several of them. You had like the Pharisees, you had the Sadducees, you had all kinds of different groups. And there's been this conflict between Jesus and these religious gatekeepers. And this section in Mark is what that conflict is all about. Now, specifically in Mark chapter 3, this is about the violation of the Sabbath, all right? Now, you don't have to know much about Jewish culture to know in ancient Judaism, Sabbath is everything, all right? Obviously, it goes all the way back to the book of Genesis where God rested on the seventh day, and the mindset behind the Sabbath was that the Jewish people were to practice this idea, that they were to take a Sabbath. And what has transpired is Jesus, being a prophet in the moment and also religious leader, Jesus is doing some things on the Sabbath that the religious gatekeepers are really angry at because they believe he's breaking the Sabbath law, okay? And so, a story prior to this, Jesus has already been warned. Jesus, if you keep doing stuff on the Sabbath, we're going to call you on it, all right? Now, these religious gatekeepers are watching him, and they're ready to accuse him like legally, like to make it actual, like a legal offense. So they've warned him already, and now they're going after it. And they've got their eyes on him, watching every move he makes. If he violates the Sabbath, then he could be liable for arrest. If he violates the Sabbath intentionally, he could receive the death penalty, all right? You're like, whoa, it's a little harsh, all right? That's in Exodus 31, verse 14. Although I should note, most scholarship would tell you that they don't believe in the first century they really practiced that very much, all right? You don't find a lot of people being executed because they broke the Sabbath. But that actually leads to other questions, which is interesting. So that means even in Jewish culture, they made some decisions about how to interpret the text. Because when the law first came out in Exodus 31, verse 14, if you broke the Sabbath intentionally, you were to be put to death. All right? So anyone who tells you, oh, God, you're just picking and choosing scriptures, yeah, we all do. All right? That's what we do. And if you're here and you're like, I don't do that, I'm a man of God, I'm a man of the Bible. Okay. Did you drive here today? You broke the Sabbath. All right? So you should be executed. So if you just line up, what we're going to do is some public executions, and we're going to make great TV. All right? It's going to be great. And then finally, they're going to expose our cult. You know what I mean? They're like, we knew it was a cult. They kill people because they broke the. Yeah, okay, you get the point. All right? No. He could just be cut off from his people, because in Exodus it talks about that too. If you break the Sabbath and it's not intentional, then they would just cut you off from the people. Now, you probably know something about that. Have you ever veered from the party line or veered from like the religious gatekeepers and had a passive-aggressive cutoff? You know what I'm talking about? That was me. I grew up evangelical. And the moment I started asking questions about the Bible, they were like, and just kind of cut me off. Yeah, it's cold. Yeah, that could be what happens. If unintentional, like if he accidentally broke the Sabbath, well, then according to Leviticus 4, he would have to make a sin offering. So he'd probably have to go out and find some animal somewhere and try to get things right with God, okay? Most scholars say likely what would happen is if he breaks the Sabbath, they've already warned him, in the first century, you're usually arrested, and then you're probably beaten to some degree, all right? So all of that is the context in what we're about to read. Jesus has already been warned by the religious elite. Stop doing things on the Sabbath. And then what I'm about to tell you happens. So it's just on par with Jesus, all right? Listen to what happens. Again, this is Mark 3:1. He entered the synagogue. Okay, the synagogue symbolic for the heart of the religious system. And a man was there who had a withered hand. They were watching him. Now, who are the they? The religious elite. And who is the him? Jesus. So they're in the synagogue. So just imagine this being like a synagogue. They say during prayer they would have the people lift their hands, is what scholarship tells us. So apparently they're lifting their hands. Jesus is in there. The religious, like elite, the gatekeepers were in there watching Jesus, all right? It's like Vegas, okay? I went to Vegas, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And first of all, I'm going to say something about Vegas. Vegas is its own world, okay? And there are a special group of people that hang out in Vegas, all right? And my wife being one of them, she played... She'd never gambled a day in her life, people, never. And I literally walked down. It was like a dad moment. I walked down to the ATM and I pulled out $100 and I literally like, Katie, this is your limit. All right, you got $100. Have fun, enjoy yourself. And all I know is it was like, I don't know. We went for like a concert I wanted to go to. I'm a big Killers fan, and the Killers were playing the home show there, and I was like, I gotta go see the Killers. And Katie was like, yeah, we'll go see him. And so we went, and the concert was amazing. Well, afterwards, they make you walk through the casino. You know what I mean? Like, you have to walk through it to get back to your room. That's kind of part of the deal. And so you walk through, and Katie was like looking at all these things. It's overwhelming if you've never been. And I'm like, Katie, a good place to start would be like roulette, because at roulette, all you have to, very basic, you can just do black, red, or green. That's all you got to do, black, red. You don't have to worry about the numbers. And she's like, all right. And so she's like, here, how does it work? And so we got up to the table, and I started watching her. And she got real clever real fast, because she started looking at all the roulette tables, and then she saw, like, the roulette tables that were all red. They'd been red like 6 times. So she would look over and go, that thing's turning black. So she'd walk over, and then she would put her bet down. She'd black. People, my wife didn't lose a bet the entire time she was in Vegas, all right? And I'm here to tell you now, we're all millionaires, all right? No. I literally had to pull her out. I'm like, Katie, we got to go. She's like, why? Because it's 2 a.m. We have to go to bed, all right? Like, she's the perfect candidate for Vegas, all right? Like, the perfect one. And then we were leaving, by the way. We were leaving to check out to come back. And then she did the ultimate no-no. We were walking through, and she's like, hey, Cody, she's like, before we got luggage in hand, she's like, before we go, just one last time. And I'm like, no. See, because here's the thing. The house always wins. You know what I'm talking about? And they know. So if you're on your way out of Vegas, they're like, everything you think you've won, we're about to get back. All right? No, they know. All right? Now, I say that to say this. I learned something about Vegas. So my wife was like gambling all of our money away. I was looking around going, oh my God, check this out. All right? I don't know if you know this, but in Vegas, they have eyes everywhere. They have eyes everywhere. Just look around the room. They have eyes everywhere. So I'm watching, and it's like you have the dealer, and the dealer's looking at you. But then there's a guy that's looking at the dealer. Have you noticed this before? And then there's another guy who's looking, that's in charge of the section, who's watching that guy, and that guy's watching the dealer, and the dealer's watching us. And then just when you think you've reached the top of being watched, check this out. You look up, and there are cameras in every single section in those rooms, all right? So somebody's watching the guy who's watching that guy who's watching the dealer, and the dealer's watching us. I'm telling you, people, what happens in Vegas does not stay in Vegas. Everybody's watching. The eyes are on them. Okay, follow me here. Jesus has rolled up into a casino-like scenario here, all right? It's called the synagogue. All the religious elite are watching him. Have you ever been watched before? Their eyes are on him. They're watching every move he makes. I used to feel that scrutiny when I was an early pastor here because they were like, oh, liberal pastor's coming in, progressive pastor into this conservative town, and he won't last at all. And they used to watch every move. Like all the enemies would listen online, not because they enjoyed the service, but because they were trying to find things. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you ever been there? They're trying to find things that I would say that they could prove that I'm a heretic, or find things that would actually get me canceled. And so they watch every single thing I did. It's like walking on eggshells. Like, make sure you don't say this. Make sure you don't say that. And turns out, guess what? I would always inevitably say it. You know what I mean? Yeah. I know. This is what's happening. Jesus is just rolling in the synagogue trying to get like his little worship moment on, and literally he can't even do that in peace because they're just watching him. Like, let's just see if he breaks the Sabbath. And apparently in prayer they lift their hands, and Jesus is in the middle of the thing, and he looks over and he sees a man with a withered hand. And it's in that moment on the Sabbath where Jesus does something remarkable. They were watching him to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath so that they might accuse him. And apparently he walks over to the man and he says, come forward. And so there's a man with a withered hand who's lifting his hands to pray, and apparently the man starts coming forward, and you know Jesus knows he's being watched. So, in my scholarly opinion, this is all intentional, and this is a public subversive demonstration. Jesus knows exactly what's happening in this moment. And he's like, yeah. Because here's the thing. When Jesus saw the man with the withered hand, he could have pulled him to the back hallway and healed him back there, and no one would have ever noticed. But you know what Jesus does? In the face of the religious gatekeeper, he's like, come forward. Like we got to make this public. Right in front of the religious elite, we're going to do this. Then he said to him, God, what a question. Is it lawful, or you would say like this, is it biblical to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath? To save life or to kill? I don't believe it was a rhetorical question. He asked the question in front of everybody, and he pauses. And then check out what the writer says next. But they were silent. Who's the they? The religious scholars. And then here it is. Here's our emotion. You ready for this? Oh my God, this is so great. He asked this provocative question. So just imagine being in this moment. The man with the withered hand comes up front. The religious gatekeepers look at him. They're ready. They're like, this would be the arrest. This would be the arrest. If he does this, we'll arrest him. It's on. And then Jesus pauses before he heals, and he's like, question. Is it lawful to heal a man on the Sabbath? To save a life or to kill? What does the Bible say? How do you interpret it? That's a provocative question. And then the text says they were silent. So they couldn't even, there's like no response. It's like, Then, check this out. He looked around at them with, and here's the word, anger. Anger. You shouldn't be angry. Well, Jesus was. Anger is not a fruit of the Spirit. Jesus got angry. And then I love what the text says. He looked at them with anger. You ever looked at someone with anger? Thank you. I have too. Yeah. I don't know what that would look like. My assumption is the man's coming up with the withered hand, and he asks this question, and then he just kind of looks at the man, and then he turns around and looks at the gatekeepers, and he's just like, he looks at them with anger. And then there's like a shift in his anger. And the text says, he was grieved at their hardness of heart and said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him on how to destroy him. Okay, let's get into this for a minute. The Sabbath was a hotly debated subject in the first century. I don't know, maybe it would be, I don't know what would be equivalent to our time right now, but you take any verse in the Bible, and it was just a hotly debated subject, whatever that would be for us. There were all kinds of rabbis who argued of what qualified as keeping the Sabbath and what doesn't qualify as keeping the Sabbath. It would be very similar to like, the idea of love your neighbor as yourself. That's a perfect example. That's actually found in the book of Leviticus. Who knew? We're going to talk about that coming up the Sunday before the election. Love your neighbor as yourself is found in the book of Leviticus. But people argued with what that meant. And turns out, apparently, I didn't know this, but this week people are still arguing about who is your neighbor. Do you know what I'm talking about? Jesus said love your neighbor, but he only meant Christians. Newsflash, there were no Christians in the Bible, okay? The Christianity did not exist. In the book of Acts, you have the first call of someone being a Christian, and it was never people saying we're Christians. It was a derogatory term of the empire calling people that, all right? Christianity did not exist. It was Judaism. I say this 1,000 times, but I'll say it again. Jesus did not come to start a new religion. He already had one, and it was working just fine. He was critiquing it as prophets do. He did not come to start a new religion. He came to show us a new way to be human, okay? And this is what's transpiring, all right? Jesus is here, and in this moment, he's in this hot debate, just like they would back in the day. This is what they did. They wrestled with these ideas. It's just like love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if somebody comes along in the New Testament and says, okay, great, well, who is your neighbor? And that's when Jesus goes in. You know the story? He goes into the Good Samaritan story. He said, I'll tell you who your neighbor is, right? And this is the idea. Same with the Sabbath. The idea behind the Sabbath, it was just hotly debated. How do you keep a Sabbath? What's off limits? Many religious people argued on how to interpret the command. Jesus, in this moment, I do not believe he's denigrating the Sabbath, all right? Jesus was not anti-Semitic, all right? No, he was a Jew himself. He's not denigrating the Sabbath law here by healing. No, he's actually expanding it and trying to get underneath it to show the intention of why it was a law to begin with. I mean, the Sabbath was a badge of Jewishness. It was about creation and liberation and rest. It was a national flag of some sorts that spoke to the freedom of the Jewish people, freedom to come, freedom that was, hope for a great day of rest when God would finally come and liberate Israel from all their oppressors. And it's about what is essential to the human experience. That what it means to be human is it means that we get tired and we have to rest. Because it's a reminder that we are not just human doings, we are human beings. But people wrestled with this in the first century. And so, Jesus steps up in this moment and he says, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save a life or to kill? The question confronts them squarely with the intention of the Sabbath law. What's behind it? And they are silent. It's as if Jesus recognizes something in this moment. He recognizes that these religious leaders seem to care more about their customs than they do about their own brother. It's like Jesus sees in that moment, these people care more about the law than they do about their own flesh and blood human brother and sister that is suffering underneath this law. And any time Anytime there is a decision to make between keeping the religion of the day and actually loving a human being, Jesus always veered on the side of loving the human being. Always. And this is what is transpiring in this moment. It's as if Jesus is saying, listen, that isn't denigrating the Sabbath law. The whole point of the Sabbath law is that we might be rejuvenated and find rest. And me healing someone in this moment that's in pain and that's suffering, living underneath this empire, is a part of what's behind the law to begin with. And then the text says something amazing. He looked at them with anger. This denotes an intensity, maybe openly expressed. I don't know how he showed them the anger or looked at them with the anger. My assumption is he did it with his eyes. I don't know how one looks at someone with anger, but apparently Jesus did. But it's in that small line that he looked at them with anger that he gives us some very basic fundamental truth of where I want to start with here, and it's this. Jesus feels all his emotion. Jesus was honest, true, compassionate, and authentic to his inner experience. Jesus feels and expresses his emotions with unashamed, unembarrassed, and unapologetic freedom. And it's like he's giving all of us in this one moment where all the line says is that Jesus looked at them with anger. It is as if in that one line lays a simple, profound truth, and it's this: you have permission to feel everything you feel. It's okay to feel. You don't have to be afraid to feel. You don't have to ignore your emotions. You don't have to bottle your emotions. You don't have to try to numb your emotions. You don't have to try to minimize your emotions. You don't have to try to deny your emotions. You don't have to apologize for your emotions. You and I are free to feel and express our emotions because to feel is what it means to be human. And that is a profound truth for us in the culture in which we live. Because for many of us, we've been afraid to feel certain things because what we've been taught about those emotions. For many of us, we've been told to ignore our emotions because it's not really true to who you are, so ignore them. For many of us, we've been told to suppress our emotions, haven't we? Or bottle them. Don't let it get out of control. Compose yourself. You're too emotional. And then for many of us, we've grown so uncomfortable with the certain emotions that we've just learned to numb them. Which is why we have more alcoholics in our country than ever before. There's nothing wrong with alcohol. I personally love it. But I do often wonder, how often are people getting drunk just because they've been taught that this emotion they're feeling is really uncomfortable and they don't know what to do with an uncomfortable emotion, so they do the only thing they know to do, and that is numb it. And I wonder if that's true for anything else that we do, whatever our addictions are. I wonder if it's a way to help us numb the feeling that we are feeling, because here's why, we don't know what to do with it. And what we can say is we don't like it. We don't like the way it feels. And so we do everything we can to try to numb ourselves to get out of that feeling. And then I can't tell you how many people I know that minimize their emotions. I mean, they almost people that are apologetic about their emotions. I can't tell you how many times that's happened here. I'll end a service, I'll end a talk like this, a teaching, and someone would come back and they'll be crying like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, wait, no. Don't ever apologize for your emotions. Don't ever apologize for you feeling the emotion of sadness. No, There's no reason. You don't have to deny it. You don't have to apologize for it. You are free to feel it. Because to feel it is what it means to be human. And I would argue, and we're going to talk about this more in 2 or 3 weeks, but we need to talk about Jesus' humanity, which we will in about 2 or 3 weeks, but I do just want to show you this. Jesus didn't just feel angry. All throughout the whole New Testament, especially the Gospels, you see ways in which Jesus feels what he feels. So let me just show you a couple of these. Luke 19, verse 31, Jesus shed tears. Luke 10, verse 21, Jesus was filled with joy. Mark 14, verse 34, Jesus was grieved. Mark 3, verse 5, Jesus was angry. Matthew 26, 37, he was sad. Luke 7, 3, he felt compassion. John 11, 35, sorrow. Mark 6, 6, Luke 7, 9, astonishment and wonder. Luke 12, 50, distress. Luke 22, 44, anguish. Jesus feels and expresses whatever emotion is surfacing in him in the moment. And he did it unashamedly, unembarrassingly, and unapologetically. It's like he knew this is what it means to be human. Jared Bias said this: if expressing emotions in a healthy way, and I'm going to put that in parentheses because that's where we're headed. If expressing emotions in a healthy way threatens, upsets, or makes someone uncomfortable, that is likely their problem, not yours. Okay? Let me repeat that. If expressing emotions in a healthy way threatens, upsets, or makes someone uncomfortable, that is likely their problem, not yours. Now, that's so basic. Now, some of you here are like, okay, could have skipped today. Already got that one, Pastor. Nailed it. All right. Wonderful. Wonderful. That's great. I had to start here, and let me tell you why. Because our culture, the one in which we're living in right now, more than ever, in my experience, encourages and sometimes outright teaches the opposite of what Jesus is showing us here. Our culture encourages and outright teaches avoidance, and I would go so far as to say, not just avoiding your emotions, but our culture goes outright to teach anti-emotionalism. As if we are to be AI robots and never feel anything. We even expect this of our leadership. We expect them to be calm, composed, and never feel anything. And how much of that is true for the religious world? I mean, I can't tell you how often this happens. And it's not even AI, don't feel anything, as much as it even is just positivity. It's like positivity is the only emotion that our culture says is okay. Just positivity. Just be positive. Oh, so we can't feel the other things? You can, but just behind closed doors. And it's like we're like these robots, like we can't express anything. But here's what I want you to know. I was taught to suppress my feelings. I was taught to ignore my feelings. I was taught in some cases growing up in the church to despise my feelings. The repression of feeling and emotions have almost in our culture been elevated to a status of virtue. Why? And here's why. Because we largely don't know what to do with our emotions. Because no one's ever taught us that. That's why we're doing this series, The Human Experience. I never took a class in school where they taught me about emotions and how to handle them. No one ever taught me about them. And so because we don't know what to do with them, we do the only thing we know. We create a whole generation of people, and we teach people what a good person looks like is one that doesn't express any emotion at all, but is just a walking robot. And you just repress them, you push them down, and you move on with your life because they cannot be trusted. So I want to show you something here. I want to show you how this pans out, particularly within our government right now. Now, what I'm about to show you is not a political endorsement. All right, most of you've been around here, you know this. First of all, I don't endorse candidates because I have a little bit of a larger mission in my life. Okay, and I don't endorse candidates for a couple reasons. One, we are a nonprofit status, so I would rather not lose that. Do you know what I'm talking about? And it can be stripped, just so you know. And especially seasons like this, what you don't know is our beautiful government actually places people in buildings like this, especially if they've been reported. And if they think you endorse a political candidate, they can strip your 501c3 status, okay? So that's not this. Now, all of that said, I also tell people, beyond all of that, I would never stand up here and tell you who to vote for many reasons. One is because most of you have been around Bindings Lake for a long time now, and I consider you the wisest humans I know. So check this out. I'm pretty sure I trust you. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you're good. I always say to people, follow the nudge within your own heart. That's all you can do. Like, whatever is in you, go. Great, all right? So I would never tell you that because you're the most educated, brilliant, wise people that I know, all right? So all that said, this is not a political endorsement. I've said it twice now, all right? But I could not find a better example of what I'm talking about emotions, than this, all right? So I want to just show you a video, and then right after that, I want to tell you what happened with this moment, all right? So this is the Democratic National Convention of something that took place with Tim Walz. So check this out. I saw that live. How many of you saw that live in the moment? Yeah, okay. Busted. I know all the Democrats. All right. I love it. Okay, so I saw that live. And I have to tell you something. I was moved. I don't care your political affiliation. I was moved by the Democratic Convention this year. I mean, genuinely, it felt like I was at the Southern Baptist Convention back in the day. Like we're bringing hope to the world. I was moved. Now, just hang with me. I know. Some people are like, oh God, there's contradictions mile deep. Yeah. I get all that. That's not the point today. I was moved. And then this moment came on, and I was like, oh my God, look at his son. Look at that man's son. Say what you want about any politician. I don't care. Yes, we could go days talking about how awful humans are. Yes, and we'll start with you, okay? Yes. And how you have contradictions a mile deep, and you're wrong, and the reason the world is the way it is because of you. Yes. And honestly, I'll flip this and say, if your whole life all you think is they're the problem, I want you to know something. You got to reverse that. The world will change when we start looking in the mirror and realizing we are the actual ones that can change the thing. It starts right here in us, okay? But I got to this moment, and Katie and I were watching it together, and I got so emotional. Now, there are many reasons why. It pulled some strings with my own father wounds. And I also want you to know, I thought it was so profound because we live in a culture right now, our American culture is suffering so many father childhood wounds right now, where there's an absence of fathers. And I thought about this moment, and I thought, oh my God, if we could amplify that moment to the world. There was something so pure about Gus, 17-year-old son, who stood up in front of thousands of people in a convention. And all his dad did was just call his name out and express how much he loved his family. Something so pure about a 17-year-old. Most 17-year-olds I know are like, I'm kind of too cool for the Democratic Convention. Or I would never stand up and embarrass myself. This kid stands up. He stands up and he literally yells out, "That's my dad." I'll ask any father in here, how much money would you give for that moment for your son to say that about you publicly in front of thousands of people? You better believe you'd love it. Because every father I know longs for their son to stand up and go, "That's my dad. And I'm proud of my dad." Yes. Yes. I saw that and I was moved and I was like, Gus, my new friend. I don't know him, but we got to get to know him. What a beautiful human. What a beautiful expression. And honestly, I know somebody is staged. Okay. We'll do a series on conspiracy theories down the road, and we'll get there, okay? But I would say if that's how you feel, there's another example of how backwards our culture is and how far it's gotten to how to handle emotions. We so don't know how to handle emotions, we have to pretend it's all staged. It's fake. And I'll argue the reason we think it's fake is because we don't know what to do with it. Because for some of you, that could be your enemy going, don't say that about them because I don't need them in the office. Don't show me their humanity. Yes. Yes. The way we will move forward in this election is not by examining esoteric policies, but it's by trying to realize how these policies actually affect human beings. Give me the flesh and blood. I hear people talking all the time about abortion right now. It's the jam. Everybody's like, abortion. Pastor, what do you think about abortion? Talk to a woman. Don't ask me. Coincidentally, that was all women who just applauded. I'm saying I'm a little leery of any man who's just like, I'll tell you how I feel about abortion. Yeah, no one's ever come at your body, so talk to someone that it actually affects. Woo, it's Sunday, guys. Okay, well, I got to get out of here. The religious gatekeepers are watching. Okay, but it's true. I mean, people all the time. It's like something about homosexuality, like like, oh my God. Show me, when is the last dinner you had with a queer person? What's the last dinner you had with a person of color? Do you hear what I'm saying? Can we deal with the flesh and blood? It's the human experience. Okay. That happened, that moment. That's my dad. And it wrecked me. I was sitting on the couch and I looked over at Katie and I was like, I don't ever recall crying from watching a political convention. And that's when we both looked at each other and we both started crying because we were both like, we're getting old. Growing up, politics, blah. Even in my early 20s, I was like, politics. So gross. And then, like, we watched the VP, and it was just like at home. I think I poured like a Moscow Mule, and I was like, but I was excited, like, it's a party. And that's just when you know you're getting old. It's like your biggest moment of the week is, oh man, Tuesday we're going to get together and have some drinks and watch the debate. My God, what has happened to us? We used to go out. That happened. And then within minutes, I don't know if you're like me, but I get on social media while debates happen just to see the commentary from people I admire. And then you see it. And I think everybody makes great points. Sometimes they'll make a point, and I'll look and I'll see. And oh my God, it's just a wide variety of opinions. And I'm just like, oh, that's interesting. That person feels that. And you can learn a lot about your mom if you just look whenever they're like, whoa, okay, all right. Well, there was a lady, I don't know her, but her name's Ann Coulter. And I don't know, I actually genuinely don't know her, so I don't know anything about her. But she tweeted this right after, talk about weird. Just pause, leave that there. Talk about weird. Now, first of all, if Ann Coulter's your cousin, let me just say this to you, okay? Ann Coulter's welcome here anytime she's watching, which she's not, but I don't know who you are, but you're obviously welcome here. I'm not, if you knew our people, we are all about love here, so we're not like pointing guns and da-da-da, because we're the problem. We're the ones, okay? But I use this just as an example. And I'll also say about this situation right here, probably, and this is a little bit of a judgment call, so give me a little bit of grace here, but it's very likely the reason that she said this is because she actually felt this. Okay, so it works both ways here. When I talk about feel what you feel, this is how she's feeling. This is why it's really critical for us. We're going to talk next week about how to, in a healthy way, express, because there are unhealthy ways to express. But I mention this to you because this is how she felt. And I often wonder, too, if maybe the reason she felt this way is because maybe she was raised in a particular way, like we all were. And here's what this tells me, okay? You're like, oh, this is just partisanship. You're probably right. But it's probably even a little bit deeper than that. I don't know Anne, but I would argue that maybe Anne longs for something just like this. How did her father treat her? Is she at a place where she could say, that's my dad? Was she raised in a particular Christian environment that told her to never express emotions like that? Yeah, I'm not trying to get all psychological here, but I would argue that there are probably some very deep childhood wounds that are packed into that tweet. So anytime you see someone on social media that's posting, you're like, I don't like that, fire away. Pause. Just know this. She apparently felt safe enough in the world to post something like that, and I'm telling you, she may not have seen it, she may be unconscious of it, but there are loads of depth to those 3 words right there. And if you can pause long enough, you might even get a sense of compassion. Like, oh, that's really sad. That's really sad. Well, it turns out we learned something about Gus, because if you're like me, I didn't know anything about Tim Walls. I didn't know anything about him or Gus or his family. Never heard of him. And then like, he's running for VP. I'm like, okay, probably need to get to know the guy. Turns out Gus is what they call neurodivergent. Okay? And Ann Coulter found out that he was neurodivergent. And so she publicly apologized after finding about him being neurodivergent. I paused. Thank you for the apology. Great. It's probably good. That's a good step. But then if you're like me, I got even more disheartened because the apology only came after she found out he was neurodivergent. So I just want to say this in the words of my friend Brittany. She said it best. She said, it's even more disheartening. It's more disheartening that she apologized after he was neurodivergent. And she went on to say, it's okay to have adoration and love for your dad and be emotional about people you love, whether you are neurodivergent or not neurodivergent. What kind of culture do we live in that we apologize and say, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, because he's excused to act that way because he has mental health problems? What in God's name are we talking about? I'm telling you, you don't have to have mental health problems to say to your father, that's my dad. But I think it's a great example of how our culture doesn't know what to do with this. We don't know what to do with it. And so what do? We have people stand up and they say, I'll tell you what we need. We need positivity only, all right? We only do positive emotions. I want to talk to you parents for just a minute. Now, and then we're going to wind it down and we're done. Are we okay? Boy, this was a fun one today, all right? Can't wait to get your emails. It's going to be great. Okay. Parents, let me talk to you for a second. First of all, I need to say this too. I didn't say it at the top, so I want to say it now. Big head nod to someone who's influenced me greatly. Over the next 3 weeks, you're going to hear me speak a lot and use quotes from this individual's book. Oh my God, she has shaped so much. She's a professor at Harvard. Her name is Susan David. She wrote this book called Emotional Agility. All right, sit right here. Now, I would encourage all of us, because we want to be emotionally mature people, all of you, if I had to make mandatory reading for this year, that would be the book. That would be it. Especially rolling into an election, especially rolling into Thanksgiving, where you're going to be around family members who disagree with you politically, especially for everything that's coming up for us, Emotional Agility. Get that book, read it. You can thank me later. I'm telling you, it will change so much for you. Now, I stress it even more to say, if you are a parent and you're raising other human beings that have emotions, oh my God, read this book. It will change your way of parenting, all right? Now, all of that said, she talks about this in the book. There's one particular moment where she talks about how parents sometimes unconsciously tell their children and teach their children and raise their children with the ideas of just the only emotion that's valid is happiness or positivity. And sometimes we do it unintentionally. We're not even aware of it. But we'll say things like, hey, son, straighten up. Big boys don't cry in moments like this. So sometimes we'll even say, kids, we're at Disney World. We don't do sadness here. Yet if you've ever gone to Disney World, it's all kids crying. This is my favorite. You spent $1 million for your kids to be miserable. All right. Maybe you've heard parents say, kids, we don't do anger here. Maybe your kid's throwing a fit on aisle 3. Just, straighten up. We don't do anger in public. I get it. But what are we teaching them in that moment? Yes. Maybe you've heard or even said stuff like, we don't do those emotions here. Or maybe you've heard this phrase if you're a parent. Go to your room and come out with a smile on your face. If you've ever been taught that, and that is conditioned in you, then you make tweets like Ann makes. Because you were taught that. It's not her fault. That's how culture conditioned her to be. Yeah, she was raised in that environment. We only do positivity, only positive emotions. Here's the problem with that, though. Research shows attempting to minimize or ignore emotions only serve to amplify them. If you attempt to minimize or ignore emotions, I can guarantee you it will only amplify them. And the result of trying to tell people all we care about is positivity, just put a smile on your face and it's in the church. It's so in the church. You go to the average church and the person who does the welcome, morning everybody, I hope you have a smile on your face. It's like, and some of you are just like, no. How we doing? I'll say that. How we doing? Because that's kind of my only neutral welcome term. How we doing? And I have yet to have it, but I'm still waiting for someone to be like, terrible. It's not good. Okay. I love it. It's honesty. But what happens is it results in inauthenticity. And then what maybe your child hears and what people hear at church is you can't actually be fully human here. And if it's just positivity in your house, then your child is hearing this. I can't actually be fully human with my parents. Yeah. And so here's the challenge today for us. What if we end the struggle of I should or shouldn't feel something? What if we just had permission to feel? This is part one. I know some of you are like, well, there's all kinds of problems with that. Yep. But we just have to start here. You have permission to feel today. You don't have to use the word I should feel this way or I shouldn't be feeling this way. No. What if you just remove those from your vocabulary? What if you just felt what you felt? Let me close with a quote. This is out of Emotional Agility, Susan David's book. Okay, now I told you, very basic. And we're going to nuance this thing in the next couple weeks. But I started here because you can see where our culture is right now. Numb, suppress, get rid, move, avoid, ignore. And God, what if we could like create a collective, a community where we actually encourage people and gave people permission to feel? Well, then people wouldn't have to feel like they're inauthentic everywhere they go. They could imagine if people could come in their full authenticity and be who they are and feel exactly what they feel, and it be safe. Do you know what I mean? It be safe. Yeah, imagine if that were the case. Imagine if you had the freedom to begin to express this week what you feel. And we're going to talk about ways to do that in healthy ways and unhealthy ways. But imagine if you started doing that in healthy ways in this moment right now. What would that look like? What would that look like? Maybe this is the talk where for the first time in your life, you pause and you're like, God, I got a list of 1,000 things my father has done in terrible ways. I know. But maybe there's one thing, and maybe you send that text. And my dad and I have had a complicated relationship for a while, and uh, we are in some of the best seasons of our life now, which is good news for any of you that are 43. I'm 43 now. He's mid 60s. We're in some of the best days of our life right now. I had to tell you, there was a season I had to go back and intentionally point at moments that I could see where he loved me. My dad used to take me, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but we lived in Alabama and for like 4 years, almost 5 years, and our house was surrounded by cornfields. A beautiful way to grow up, by the way. So fun. I wouldn't change anything. I love where we live now in Atlanta, but I'm so glad I didn't grow up in Atlanta. I'm so, like buildings and concrete, you know what I'm talking about? I had cornfields and go-karts and dirt bikes, do you know what I'm talking about? And I raised hell in those country fields, all right? Like, and it was just me and God. Brrr, you know what I mean? Like, oh man. And then I turned into a heretic. I don't know how it happened. All right, so society. But they would come through and plow those fields. And then when it would rain, my dad would wake me up early. He'd say, "Hey, you want to go hunting?" And it wasn't hunting like deer. My dad didn't hunt. Which looking back now, I'm like, huh, that's interesting. But my dad did what is called arrowhead hunting. And he would get me up, and when they would plow the fields and it would rain, we would go out to these fields and we would just walk the fields together, and we would find, when you see rocks, and you'd pull them up, and there would be these amazing, like, arrowheads that Native Americans used to use to, like, kill animals and people. So now that I think about it, I'm like, pretty sick, Dad. But then we did that for years, and we started collecting them. And so to this date, if you go to my parents' house, I walk in, and there's a whole, like, little, like, shelf thing that sits, and it has a glass tops, and all the arrowheads are in there. And every time I pass it, it brings a smile to my face going, yeah, that's it. That's it. That's my dad. That's it. Yeah. Yes. So I'm saying feel what you feel. So let me tell you what I did. I went and played golf with my dad one time, and I literally, like, this was hard. Integration's hard. You hear sermons like this, you're like, great job on the sermon. Yeah, well, I'm going to watch your life this week because I want to say great job to you, because it's one thing to come in and just, like, hear a teaching, and y'all do that Sunday in and Sunday out. I still don't know why you show up every Sunday. I really don't. And you hear it, and I've been going forever. I go in out. Everybody in the church was like, are you just narcissistic? Why do you teach so long? And I'm like, I'm obsessed with my own teachings. No other church goes this long teaching. None. 15-minute homilies. But here's the thing. Integration's hard. You can come in and hear this teaching all day long. But I don't want that just for you. I want you to go out and actually flesh this stuff out. So maybe you today, maybe you make the leap. Maybe you pick up the phone and call that parent. Hey, thank you. You are a good dad. Or thank you. Thank you for taking me arrowhead hunting. Those memories, so good. So good. Yeah, hang on to those. I know. All right. Now, let's close here with this quote. I think you'll like it. This is Susan David. She said, "One of the greatest human triumphs is to choose to make room in our hearts for both the joy and the pain, and to get comfortable with being uncomfortable." Wow, isn't that a great line? This means seeing feelings not as being good or bad, but as just being. Yes, there is the relentless assumption in our culture that we need to do something when we have inner turmoil. We must struggle with it, fix it, control it, exert brute force willpower over it, remain positive. What we really need to do, though, is also what is most simple and obvious: nothing. God, that's it. That is to just welcome these inner experiences, breathe into them, and learn their contours without racing for the exits. Yeah. Friends, there are no good and bad emotions. Emotions are just what they are, emotions. There might be comfortable and uncomfortable emotions, but there are no good or bad emotions. So, benediction, may you, Vinings Lake, may you find the courage to experience the fullness of your emotions this week. What if we felt our emotions instead of disconnecting from them this week? May we open ourselves up to ourselves, and may we exercise the muscle of feeling this week. You don't have to apologize for how you feel. All right, people, thank you for leaning in. Next week, we'll get to the separation. Can we trust these emotions? All right, we'll talk about that. I'm so glad you're here. We've gone way too long. Get outside. Get outside, just go, just leave. All right, because it's so beautiful. Vonnie's like, peace be with you.